second trip. Yeah, this is my second trip here. I always jump at the chance. I love Wisconsin. That's how Alex and I first met last year in Wisconsin. And some of you that have never heard me speak will probably be shocked at what I tell you. But I will tell you one thing. I am one of the 22 members, founding members of the National Tea Party. The Tea Party movement was founded in February of 2009 on a national basis, and I was one of 22 that co-founded the National Tea Party. I will tell you again, just because somebody has Tea Party or calls themselves Tea Party does not mean they are. Does not mean they're principled. So I would urge caution when you try to paint the Tea Party with a broad brush. Because from what I found, with the right message, activists are receptive to solar and clean energy. The conservative case for solar. I have to put my eyes on it. If you reach a certain age, all the ones that very know you can't help me. Okay, conservatives for energy freedom. Our mission is simple: energy freedom. Utility customers should have the freedom to choose their energy choice. We want to remove barriers that prevent energy freedom, and we want to allow all energy to compete in the market on a level playing field and allow the market to decide what energy is best. Is there anyone in this room that disagrees with that? Raise your hand. Did not think so. Conservative case for solar. This is our mission. And I want somebody to tell me, raise your hand if you know who said this. I am pleased to sign the instrument of ratification for the Montreal Protocol. And the most important, if we've learned any lessons during the past decades, perhaps the most important is that preservation of our environment is not a partisan challenge. It's common sense. Our physical health, our social happiness, and our economic well-being will be sustained only by all of us working in partnership as effective stewards of our natural resources. Not you, Alex. Anybody know who said that? Any guess? Absolutely. Ronald Reagan made that statement. And he actually, not many people remember Reagan. People remember him as being anti-regulation, but he was actually a conservationist. His Secretary of State, George Shultz, firm believer. Shultz believes in climate change. He drives an electric-powered car and is a big advocate of solar. Why solar? Why should conservatives care about solar? There are 4 reasons: free market choice, national security, job creation, and being good stewards of our environment. Free market choice, definition of a monopoly, the exclusive possession or control of the supplier or trade in a commodity or service. True principled conservatives champion free market choice, not government-created monopolies that stifle innovation. Conservatives want a choice. As I said, conservatives are receptive. Don't ever believe in this room that you can't reach out and bring Republicans or conservatives on board with solar. It has to be the right message. There was a national poll conducted, and Alex will give you recent information on different polls that show conservatives want choice in energy. Conservatives. The tracking poll was done July 3rd to August 3rd of 2015. They mentioned a project that I'm very heavily involved in. Florida is one of my states I'm involved in. We have a free market ballot initiative, and it simply would allow third-party sales and leasing of solar, and it would allow private property owners to sell excess power generated from solar to their neighbors on a limited basis. So conservatives were asked nationwide what they thought, voters in general, and here are the results. This is something you need to show to Republican elected officials. If you look, they were asked, would you support solar, third-party sales and leasing in your state? If you look, registered voters, 70% support. If you look at independents, 69%. Independent women, 62%. Republicans, men and women, Republicans, 72% of self-identified Republican voters supported it. Tea Party supporter, 76%. That's huge. Conservative, 73% of conservatives support third-party sales and leasing of solar. This is something you need to take to your Republican legislators here in Minnesota. Another reason to support solar is national security. There is nothing more centralized in our nation than our power grid, nor more vulnerable to terrorist attack. The National Energy Regulatory Commission found that terrorists would have to take down only 9 key substations out of more than 54,000, and it would cause a blackout from coast to coast. Distributed generation will help mitigate against catastrophic damage. It's easy to identify and attack substations. It's a lot more difficult to attack millions and millions of rooftop solar. This was a report that was commissioned under the Bush administration, and he classified it, and President Obama released it. It talked about the hardships. If you can look, it talks about the economic hardships. Terrorists don't have to attack the World Trade Center. They can attack our power grid. This is another reason that if you think the grid's not vulnerable, how many of you realize that we've already had an attack on our power grid? It happened in April of 2013. The terrorists cut the phone lines, opened fire on the substation that powered Silicon Valley with AK-47s, took it down, and power had to be rerouted. And this was reported by Glenn Beck. It talks about what actually happened. That this is a big national security issue. Al-Qaeda and ISIS and China and Russia, they're all trying to hack into our infrastructure. Last year, there were over 100 documented attacks of people trying to hack into our infrastructure from enemies of the United States. If you don't think that this is a vital issue, you better think again. Okay, here's a big issue for conservative Republicans. Jobs, jobs, jobs. This is Environmental Entrepreneurs released a jobs report about the first quarter of 2015. Guess who led the way? Georgia, one of the reddest of red states. I began to become active in Georgia the latter part of 2012. Up until the time I was a leading conservative voice for solar in Georgia, any kind of solar or pro-solar legislation or initiative was dead in the water because they knew Americans for Prosperity, which is a co-funded group, would attack me. I got engaged, and now The Georgia PSC, led by Republicans, they are a public service commission that actually looks out for the best interest of ratepayers, not like the Wisconsin Public Service Commission that looks out for the best interest of the monopolies. And Georgia is leading the way for solar. We just passed through our Georgia legislature every state government position, elected statewide positions held by Republicans. The Republicans almost have a supermajority in the Georgia legislature. They passed through a third-party sales and lease bill, otherwise known as a PPA, without one dissenting vote. Not one. Georgia Power, they brought Georgia Power on board with it, and lo and behold, Georgia Power decided to get into the rooftop solar business. They're closely monitored by the PSC. They can't hold an unfair advantage or use their monopoly resources. So Georgia Power, that followed us in 2012 and 2013, has effectively seen the light, and now they're promoting solar. Georgia, in the first quarter of this year, created 2,800 good-paying jobs in clean energy, and the overwhelming majority was in the solar industry. The beauty of just simply removing the barriers to create solar jobs, you don't have to go out and offer all these incentives and spend all this money like states do to include big manufacturing companies. Remove the barriers, allow solar to compete, and it will create jobs. 2,800 in Georgia in just the first quarter. We expect solar jobs to literally explode because of the PPA bill. That's something conservatives support. You can see from the jobs report, Georgia led California. We created 1,000 more clean energy jobs than California did, Georgia did. And it's being led by Republicans. Conservative Republicans are leading the way in Georgia based on a free market message. Why do some oppose solar? Follow the money. And trust me, I know who opposes. I know who the players are. I'm fighting them nationwide. They're going after solar. Sometimes I think they are. A lot of these Coke-funded groups all share the same brain because they use the same talking points. Fossil fuel donors. A lot of these groups are backed by fossil fuel. They have Koch brothers, extensive interest in fossil fuel. ExxonMobil gives a lot of money to all of these groups. Follow the money. Utilities are going after solar. Not all utilities are like Excel here in Minnesota. Some are like We Energies in Wisconsin, like Florida Power and Light and Duke Energy in Florida, and Louisiana's Energy. The utility model is they socialize the cost but privatize the profit. The utility model is every time they have to go out and build a new power plant, the more money they spend on construction, the more money they make. So they're a little hesitant about solar, about wind, about clean energy because the costs are significantly reduced when you add solar or wind versus building a nuclear plant. So they want to keep on making money. The utilities are going after solar. Edison Electric Institute released a white paper that talked about the disruptive challenges. I wrote a column, an op-ed for UK Guardian, and these are some of the things that I stated. They use deception. They're going after solar nationwide. It's not in just one state. As I said, they're all different. You can't, it's not one size fits all. In Georgia, I mean, Southern Company is the parent company of Georgia Power. So Georgia Power is praising solar, but in the next state, in Alabama Power, they're attacking solar, and they're trying to stop solar. I think it is very hypocritical of Republicans and groups that call themselves conservatives to try to deny consumers choice and to protect monopolies from competition. That violates free market principles. These monopolies will say, well, if less people are using our power, if they go to solar and less people are losing our power, then we're going to have to raise the rates for everybody else. That's like a hospital banning people from joining health clubs because they'll be healthy and thereby making less visits to the hospital. That is exactly how ludicrous their arguments are. They go at how do utilities attack solar? They go after net metering. They're changing the rate they pay, and as far as net metering, my feeling is that consumers have no option. They are told they cannot sell their excess solar generated to anyone other than a government-created monopoly. So the government-created monopoly should have to pay fair value, not wholesale. If they don't like net metering, then the solution is to open up the market and allow consumers to sell excess power to their neighbors on continuous property. In Florida, our amendment has it up to 2 megawatts on a limited basis. And that's something that these utilities are doing nationwide. They try to roll back and scale back RPS. And this is something that I've really noticed. They've started instituting tax on solar. I call it a solar tax. The monopolies like to fluff it up and call it, oh, it's a user fee. Well, you can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. So they call it a fee. It's a solar tax, and they're punitive. Utilities have the right to call a fair, to charge a fair price for the actual cost of maintenance and operation of the grid. But some utilities are going after it by charging a solar tax to be punitive to discourage solar use. We have some groups that I've already alluded to. They're funded by fossil fuel. They hide their donations. They join with monopolies to kill solar. Many times they resort to lies and distortion, as was the case in Florida with Americans for Prosperity. Trust me, Alex will tell you, when these groups put out information that's completely false and outright lies, I do not hesitate in any shape, form, or fashion to call them out for their hypocrisy and their lies. The newspaper, PolitiFact, called out Americans for Prosperity for their blatant lies about solar in Georgia. Many look, and this is something that I've noticed, and by the way, if you haven't seen the movie by a friend of mine, Robbie Kenner, called Marches of Doubt, get the movie. It's eye-opening to everyone. One of the things that I noticed that the movie brought out was that these fossil fuel interests and these anti-renewable groups are deploying the same strategy of big tobacco. And this is in 1994. The executives with big tobacco were still trying to say cigarettes did not cause health issues. How many in this room believe that cigarettes and secondhand smoke does not cause health issues? Please raise your hand. Well, this is from R.J. Reynolds. This was released part of a lawsuit, and it was written by R.J. Reynolds to defend solar. One of the things they're doing, produce comprehensive research on healthcare excesses issue. So they're trying to blame the lung cancer and all of the issues consumers were having on just they weren't being taken care of themselves. And they were actually producing and writing and funding their own research. The exact same thing is being done now by ExxonMobil, by Koch brothers. They're funding research to dispute climate change. They're trying to say, oh man, it's not damaging their environment. They're trying to say solar's bad. So they're doing their own research. That's like allowing a rooster to guard the hen house. That is totally ridiculous. Another thing, get research in the hands of really members of Congress. Does anybody know who ALEC is? That's exactly what the American Legislative Exchange Council is. And their research is very fallible, but they don't care. See placement of comprehensive story in major media. You see, watch Fox News, you read a lot of the major conservative media, they all point to the same flawed research. Conservative thought leader publications, that's exactly what's going on. And one of their topics was why doctors should worry about Bill Clinton because he was filing a lawsuit against the tobacco companies. Crank out letters to the editor and began major op-ed on this. Consider third-party coalition work. Americans for Tax Reform, who knows who Americans for Tax Reform and Grover Norquist is? Major conservative players. They instituted, they got Grover Norquist to help them mislead the public that tobacco did not cause health issues. Another thing they did is they create training. You have Heartland Institute, Americans for Prosperity, 60 plus. They all have training where they bring activists in and give them the same kind of propaganda that solar's bad, it's not reliable. I mean, it is totally ridiculous. They insult people's intelligence. A big player that I've come across is called Heartland Institute, James Taylor. How many know who Heartland and James Taylor is? Raise your hands, please. He and I butted heads. He doesn't like me too much because I called him a liar. And I brought out the fact that he opposed our ballot initiative in Florida, as did AFP, but when I publicly castigated them for lies and deception and pointing where their money comes from, they backed off a little bit. Well, Heartland is the same group that took money from big tobacco to tell and mislead activists about secondhand smoking, about cigarettes. Joe Bass is the president of Heartland. They're a big player also in the climate change, denying we're doing damage to the environment. They side with big tobacco. They're telling lies about solar. In a 1998 op-ed, the Heartland president claimed that moderate smoking does not raise lung issues, and there were few, if any, adverse effects associated with smoking. At the same time, they were taking money. Of course, last year he tried to deny it until he was presented with his op-ed, which I do have. And that's something that, we all need to be very aware of. It's a fight, but it is a winnable fight we have. It just has my email address. Debbie, D-E-B-B-I-E, at energyfreedomusa.org. It has my phone number. 678-761-6725. I'm going to leave this on the screen. Go to Facebook if you have a Facebook account, which I'm sure just about everybody in the room does. Follow Green Tea Coalition. We have a Facebook page. Don't go to the group, go to the page. We have a Facebook page. Conservatives for Energy Freedom also has a Facebook page, and I've got a lot of articles linked. follow us and show support. And I'm going to be around. I'm speaking tomorrow after next, so I'll be around for questions. And it is a sincere pleasure to be with you guys.